Hey guys, this will be with a video on what the best junglers are for this new patch with an emphasis on solo queue. Despite me moving into a caster and analyst role in the EU LCS, I still think there is a somewhat significant divide between what's optimal in solo queue compared to professional play. So this video will stay more relevant to you, the average Joe League player, and not so much just reflect what's popular in pro play right now. This is the first time in a long while I've done a tier list style video for junglers, so feel free to let me know what you think about the format and if you want to see more in future. So 8.16 saw a few nerfs to the popular junglers. How do things shake up moving forward? Here are the best junglers around right now in this patch. If you clicked on this video just to see this, then thanks for stopping by, have a fantastic day, and see you next patch. If you want a bit more info on how to play these champions, stick around because I'll be giving you a cheeky little quick start guide for all of these junglers. And stay tuned to the end of the video if you want to see what my wildcard pick is for this patch. First jungler we'll talk about is Evelynn. Eve is by far, in my opinion, the best jungler in this patch. I already think she was up there in previous patches, but with the other strong junglers like Nocturne, Kindred, and Thalia receiving nerfs over time, she's the queen on the throne for the time being. We'll see whether the rune nerfs affect her heavily, but in my eyes, she's still number one. Eve is really good at being an assassin, which is what her entire strength essentially boils down to. Due to her stealth mechanics, she is exceptionally hard to scout out, and with players' tendencies to split up in solo queue, she's very effective at catching people out of position. Not to mention, she also has the capacity to one-shot more or less any squishy even without hitting her full combo, something that, if you may pardon my French, is utter bullshit. But hey, c'est la vie. Her big weakness is her pre-6, something that when she gets nerfed, and trust me, she will be her exploitable area. But as it stands, it's at worst merely a setback for the Purple Temptress. Here's your setup for Eve jungle. Not too much to discuss here, just go massive AP damage and you'll be sorted. Play to farm for your level 6 and then utilize your stealth to sneak up on people and obliterate them. When you're clearing the jungle, make sure you charge your W before engaging the camp. The same goes for your early ganks before you have that crazy damage. Like I mentioned, the part of the game when you don't need your full combo to delete people. One negative part about trying to add Eve to your champion pool, outside of the fact you book yourself a one-way ticket to hell for dabbling in abusing such a disgusting champion, is the fact that Eve is banned fairly frequently. In fact, in Korea, she is the most banned jungler in the entire game. Not as hated in the West, apparently, but still often sees bans. Let's move on to the next champion. Let's talk about Nocturne. Hugely popular a few patches ago, he received a fair few nerfs and isn't quite the force he once was. Nocturne is still very strong in solo queue, especially in the right hands. He's got a crap ton of damage, great 1v1 skirmishes. A champion like Nocturne will always be good in solo queue, as he's so good at punishing enemy players that don't respect his ability to engage and counter gank with his ultimate. Not to mention the incredible utility offered by the Blackout, which hard scrambles enemy teams in teamfights. Here's how you play Nocturne: loads of damage with the option to go full squish, or with a safer build allowing you to dive in without popping straight away. You'll also notice that Lethal Tempo is the go-to rune on Nocturne. It allows you to dodge those rune nerfs to electrocute sudden impact, though you'll still feel that celerity nerf, something that gives Nocturne a decent chunk of AD when his Q goes down or when he's fearing someone with his E. Nocturne isn't a particularly hard champion to play. Farming till level 6 is a decent fallback strategy, since without his ultimate, he has no reliable way to get in on people to gank them. The better you get with him though, the more you'll realize he's actually pretty bloody good in the early games, so you just gotta have a good game sense to get into positions where your lack of mobility early isn't as big of a problem. Everything gets easier when you hit level 6. My recommendation is to lane gank bot lane whenever your ultimate is off cooldown. Legit, just bomb it down the lane, press R on the AD carry. Why bot lane specifically? Well, it's an easier target since you have 2 people to help you instead of 1. It is a longer lane, so it's harder to run away from you. There's a higher chance of you getting more than just 1 kill. And pushing resources into your carry bot is, generally speaking, never a bad idea. You can definitely use your ultimate on the other lanes, of course. I just recommend defaulting to that bot lane like a substitute teacher defaults to saying the foreign kid's name wrong on the register. Let's move on to our next jungler now. If you've been watching my Road to Master series or my stream, which is fb.gg/foxdroplol, you'll know I've been abusing Thalia a lot for free elo. Ever since her change that made her Q single target and not AoE, she's been a crazy strong jungler in both solo queue and competitive. She's been whacked around the gobber a fair few times with the nerf bat, but she's still been a staple in the old jingle jangle. This last nerf, however, may or may not prove to be the final nail in the coffin. My estimations as a Thalia player are that it won't, hence her presence in this video. The W nerf isn't too bad, the rune changes are the bigger one, but I still think she'll be a top tier jungler. Her clear speeds after level 5 or so are still incredible. Her damage and burst is absolutely nutty, and she has good lane pressure in the early game thanks to a versatile kit mixed with both damage and CC. Here's your setup for Thalia. There are a few options for item builds, but basically if it gives you AP, it is a good choice. Then it just depends on what your needs are for that specific game. Thalia is a good early game ganker, but like I say, she's got ridiculous clear speeds after you get some points in that queue, and especially after running echoes when things just feel really good. So if you don't get those ganks going, it's not the end of the world. She's also a carry by nature, right? So even if you fall behind early on, you can just farm it up and pull through as the game goes on. One thing I will say you need to practice on with Thalia is your seismic shoves, your W. It's a really unique ability and it's easy to miss it. I myself am absolutely awful at landing that ability. But yeah, it often makes or breaks your successful plays on Thalia. Speaking of abusing champions, another one that I've been doing quite a lot of that is Xin Zhao. More so last season than this one, but he's still a very capable jungler. The best thing about Xin is that he takes absolutely zero mechanics to play. He's a pretty brain AFK champion that anyone can pick up. He's good at all elos too, so whether you're in bronze or challenger, you'll still find success on this guy. Xin is a crazy strong 1v1 champion that ganks exceptionally well. Later on, if you go a full damage build, which I recommend, you can delete the enemy carries from a team fight even if they are surrounded by their team, which is unequivocal filth, by the way. Here's what I'd recommend running on Xin. He's another champion that's not been hit too hard by the rune changes nerf. Just means that it's better to go precision over domination secondary, which is something most players were doing anyway. It's a bit like what happened when press the attack got nerfed and you had to switch over to phase rush, which was something not everyone was doing but was still pretty popular nonetheless. When you're playing Xin, make sure you don't just farm in the early game. Unlike Evelynn and Nocturne, Xin is hugely powerful right from level 2. If you're feeling cheeky, you can go and look for those level 2 ganks, but make sure whatever you're doing that you're taking advantage of that early strength of yours. Go for the ganks, go for the invades, whatever. Just don't sit in spawn and pick your nose. Xin does fall off as the game goes on, however, so if the game doesn't go too well for you early on, it can be really hard to be useful on this champion, and you'll have to itemize more into a bruiser tanky build, which is really not something that you want to do. If you want to learn more about playing Xin, you can watch one of my many gameplays on him where I can go into much more depth about how to play him. Next up is a champion that Yorick really digs. It's Graves. He's a good bully jungler, good at farming, controlling the jungle, and with it, the enemy jungler. He's not so much of a standard ganking champion, however, which can make him a bit harder to have consistent performances on if you're more used to that ganking playstyle. Nonetheless, Graves is still obviously a solid choice. And here's how you play Graves. He's benefited from the buff to Stormrazor, specifically the item intended to lift up the crit ADCs in the bot lane. It's found quite a nice slot in the Chain Smoker's inventory. Also someone who isn't hit too hard by those rune nerfs, preferring the precision tree than anything else. Graves also isn't too mechanically difficult. One thing you want to master is how to put that smoke screen down to block off vision from the opponents. It's legit one of the most underrated mechanics in the entire game. He also isn't particularly punishing to play, as his win rate statistically doesn't fluctuate too much throughout the game. Barely a 2% change from the early game to the late game. This means that if your early wasn't too great, you're still in with a good shot of winning if, and this is a big if, something that you'll absolutely need to incorporate to your playstyle, you farmed enough. Do not neglect your farm on Graves. He's a carry after all and really won't treat you right if he's down on items or levels. Other than nailing that smoke screen positioning, there are two other important things you want to know when playing Graves. Lining up your enemies against a wall before you use your Q, else it's basically impossible to land your heavy damage. And lastly, when you're clearing the jungle, try and keep your quick draw stacks as high as you can to take less damage and have an overall healthier clear. And the last of our top junglers for solo queue is Shaco. To be honest, Shaco, or Shaco if you're wrong, has been strong in solo queue ever since his rework. What makes him shine is his ability to one-shot people as the game goes on. Like, legitimately one-shot them. He's one of the best assassins in the game currently, especially in that late game, and with the meta shifting to a more late game style, Shaco has the time to scale up and be a true terror. Here's how you play Shaco. A lot of this stuff is actually quite hard to demonstrate through a graphic like this because it's got some really unique setups to suit different players with their different play styles. But generally speaking, do this stuff and you'll be absolutely fine. At least for starters, and then you can experiment as you wish. It's really hard to play versus a good Shaco, which is also something I should mention here. Shaco is not easy to play. He's not some kind of like 4000 IQ champion, but he definitely has a different playstyle to most other junglers. Because of this, I wouldn't actually really recommend Shaco to pick him up, but he is most definitely a really good one-trick option. He has a low play rate, low ban rate, and really strong when you get to grips with how he functions. So this brings us to our wild card jungler. This is someone I feel like is flying under the radar just a little bit, someone who is good for solo queue and who I'd recommend to pick up and play. This patch's wildcard jungler is Rammus. Rammus got buffed in this last patch, patch 8.16, which saw him receive even more tanky stats on his W. With the damage runes getting nerfed, games are looking like they might favor late game once more. Rammus dodges more of his trickier matchups, those early game bullies, and does what he does best, be a massive thorn, or I guess spike, in the side of the enemy marksman. So here's Rammus's setup. Pretty simple stuff really, get tanky, be unkillable, roll up people, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Rammus is actually not the early game ganker that some people think he is. Don't get me wrong, he can definitely gank early on, but his strength is realized more when he gets some items peaking at that mid game, but still being more than potent in the late stages of the game. To that end, spam ganking early on may not be your go-to strategy. If you see the opportunity to do so, by all means go for it, but otherwise don't be afraid to just chill out a little bit, play more for that mid-game unkillableness. He's also ridiculously fast, as you might imagine, which combined with Righteous Glory, if you've opted into it, makes his teamfight engage pretty bloody nutty. So that will do it for this patch's top junglers. If you've enjoyed the video, please do leave me with that cheeky thumbs up and subscribe to me if you want to see more content from League of Legends on this channel. Feel free to leave me a comment if you have any questions about this video or any suggestions for the future videos. Like if you think that your champion deserves to be on this list, maybe you're not sure about whether or not you can play whoever it is, then feel free to leave a comment. I'll try to get around to answering as many of those as I can. But most importantly, boys and girls, thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate it a lot. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in my next.